Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Under the Dome session. We are so delighted everyone has joined us this afternoon. I want to take a minute and thank our sponsors for the series. They are EHRA Engineering, HNTB, Memorial Hermann Hospital System, and the Goodman Corporation. Without their support, this series would not be possible, and so we really thank you for your sponsorship. I also want to thank our mobility partners, which are our members for our annual, our highest invested members that really support our advocacy efforts throughout the whole year and all of our programming. And we would not be able to be the advocates we are without their support. So thank you so much. I do want to remind everybody that if you do have a question, please submit it to me in the chat box with your name and your affiliation and your full question. And I also want to take a minute to remind everybody that these conversations are often found on Twitter, hashtag TXLEGE for any chatter that you want to have online about what we're talking about. It's a great way to stay tuned for what's going on. I also want to remind everybody that the last couple of weeks, we've started to have some bill hearings for bills for transportation. Today at 2 o'clock, there was one for the Texas Mobility Fund being heard. And then tomorrow morning, there's one for TRZ, so Transportation Reinvestment Zones. So look for more information coming from TAG on how you can engage and support those two pieces of legislation. And so with that, I want to go ahead and get started today. We're so honored to have Chairman Bruce Bugg. He's chair of the Texas Transportation Commission. He's been serving since about 2015, I believe. And we are so delighted to have him here today and have his time, his wisdom, and his knowledge as it relates to transportation and all that he's been able to spearhead during his tenure as chairman. And certainly this last year has proven to provide even more challenges and opportunities for you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Chairman Bugg, and we're looking forward to hearing from you today, Chairman.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and thank you all for having me back. Some of you may remember that I was invited from you to come to Houston in January of 2017, and I spoke at your annual meeting. I remember that day extremely well, Andrea, and enjoyed it. And I'm glad to be back with my friends in Houston. And it's always great to talk to some fellow Texans about transportation. And I want to especially thank you all because your TAG group has been a great advocate for transportation through COVID. You all have done an amazing job of your respective organizations powering through the challenges that have been brought to all of us by COVID-19. I can tell you that I'm very proud of the over 12,000 women and men of TxDOT and how they have been able to keep all of the important transportation projects moving forward during this time of COVID-19. Hopefully with the advent of the vaccines, better testing, hopefully we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel for all of us, and we can get back to what we all crave. Didn't realize we craved it so much, but that's normalcy. So thank you all for inviting me again to be back with you almost 4 years later. I'm looking forward to just sharing a little bit of time with you. Andrea, you mentioned time and talent, and I don't know that I have a lot of talent to share with you, but I do have some time to share with you today. So I'll give a few, maybe some opening remarks, and then I'd really like to kind of open it up and take your questions if you have any, Andrea, and questions from your members of your TAG organization. And Transportation Advocacy Group is a very important component of, we rely on you in Houston, and I know that you've extended your borders beyond Houston. So thank you for everything that you do. Just a couple of things. First of all, I just want to thank Governor Greg Abbott for having reappointed me to another 6-year term. It's hard to believe that the first 6 years, they literally flew by. Governor Abbott called and asked me to join the Texas Transportation Commission about 2 weeks after he was inaugurated. And I told him that I didn't really know that much about transportation except getting stuck by, behind the wheel of my car in traffic. And he said, that's all you really need to understand is congestion and how to fix that. So he asked me to kind of bring my private sector experience to the table. And hopefully that's been helpful to not only our friends in Houston, but around the state. I can tell you that I'm very honored that Governor Abbott did just reappoint me to a new 6-year term as chairman of the Texas Transportation Commission. I'm extremely proud, as I said, of the over 12,000 men and women of the Texas Department of Transportation, and look forward to continuing to lead this wonderful organization and work with people like you. That's what it's all about. At the end of the day, everything that we do is about connecting with people. Our motto is connecting with Texas, but at the end of the day, it's relationships that really matter. So just a couple of things to kind of share with you from a kind of a high level. Right after Governor Abbott first appointed me in 2015, one of the things that I remembered from his one of his campaign TV commercials that I saw, and probably many of you saw the same thing, and that was it was actually filmed in downtown Dallas, and it was that famous commercial that said, if a guy in a wheelchair can go faster than traffic in the state of Texas, we've got a real problem. We need to fix our transportation system. And so when Governor Abbott came in and appointed me, as I mentioned, to the commission in February of 2015, one of the first things he did was he championed new transportation funding. And of course, he came into office as governor at the same time that he ran in November of 2014. He also ran with Proposition 1, and we'll all remember that the voters of the state of Texas spoke loudly and clearly, and by an 80% margin, they voted in favor of passing Proposition 1. That shows that transportation is absolutely not a Republican or a Democratic issue. It's not a political issue. It is an issue that affects everyone in their daily lives. And then Governor Abbott, coming into office, took, as the governor of the state of Texas, the first legislative session in January of 2015, and basically increased the focus on transportation funding. Ended the diversions. You'll remember that was about $600 million a year that took money out of our state gas tax, and it was used to plug budget holes. He also championed what became Proposition 7 that went back to the voters in November of 2015. And that was another initiative to increase transportation funding, and that passed by 83%. So on the heels of a 2014 transportation funding measure that the voters passed by 80%, and then coming back about a year later and passed another initiative by 83%, that's added roughly 44% to our 10-year unified transportation program, which has been huge as we confront the issues of transportation around the entire state of Texas. Now, living in Houston, I don't need to explain to you the problems with congestion. You have the opportunity to experience that every day, but you also, I hope, are seeing a lot of orange cones sprouting up around Houston, and we're continuing to work on what we call Texas Clear Lanes. So let me just kind of jump in on Texas Clear Lanes, because we talked in January of 2017 about it, but it's been a little over 4 years since we've been together. So Texas Clear Lanes started out as a program when that kernel of an idea was given to me by that TV ad of Governor Abbott saying, if a guy in a wheelchair can go faster in transportation, we need to fix that. Well, it turns out that with 67% of Texans living in the 5 major metropolitan areas of Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, that's where the major congestion has been. That's where the top 100 most congested choke points that we use as one of the metrics that we try to go after. That kind of gave us the impetus to let's figure out how to put together a program that will come in and address congestion in these 5 major metropolitan areas. Governor Abbott publicly called on the commission, the only time he's publicly called on the Texas Transportation Commission, and that was in September of 2015. And he asked the commission to come up with a plan to basically come up with a statewide strategic plan that addresses congestion relief in these 5 major metropolitan areas and beyond throughout the entire state of Texas. From that, I was asked to lead that on behalf of the commission in September of 2015. And today that's known as Texas Clear Lanes. Now, I just came from we have monthly congestion task force meetings for Texas Clear Lanes. And just before I joined you on this call today, I just came from a meeting of our monthly congestion task force. And I want to share with you the most updated numbers. And that is that since Governor Abbott called on us in September of 2015 to come up with what is now Texas Clear Lanes, we now have $26,387,000,000 projects throughout the state of Texas that are either they've been completed, they're currently under construction, or they're in the UTP and partially or fully funded for future projects. And the UTP, as I mentioned before, is our Unified Transportation Program that spans over a 10-year period of time. So 26 billion out of our UTP, this 2021 biennium is basically about $76 billion. So you can see what an impact and what a priority we've given to Texas Clear Lanes. I might also add that in this meeting today, and we're going to have a special commission meeting tomorrow, and I would encourage you all to listen to this. We're going to do a deep dive on Texas Clear Lanes tomorrow morning, starting at 10 o'clock, a special commission meeting we're having here in Austin. But in addition to that $26.4 billion, we'll call it, of projects either under construction or having been completed or in the UTP, we also have an additional $21 billion of projects that have been identified as future projects, but these have already passed muster on various stages of engineering, various stages of our staff scoring these projects, and we in fact have over $1.8 billion of funding for these projects that are not yet even in the UTP. So we are very focused on how to address congestion relief in the state of Texas. But with all of that, you may ask, what are we doing for the rest of the state? And so one of the things that I want to share with you is the other part of this that I would really like to bring to your attention, and that is that out of our 254 counties around the state of Texas, 173 of those counties are deemed to be rural counties. And one of the most important functions of the Texas Transportation Commission, and that we try to work very hard, and I want you to hear this, we try to work very hard. And of course, we have Commissioners Laura Ryan from the Houston area. Very proud of the work she's doing in safety, and we'll talk about safety in a little bit. And then we have Commissioner Alvin New. He's representing the rural districts of the state of Texas. And then our newest commissioner is Commissioner Robbie Vaughn from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, doing a fantastic job. The four of us work very closely together in trying to bring the best decisions for you and for everyone in the state of Texas. But one of the hardest things, just to kind of take you inside the room, so to speak, is the balance that we have. So I mentioned before, when Texas Clear Lanes was conceived, it was really to address the 67% of the population that lives in those 5 major metropolitan areas. You do the math, and that leaves basically 33% of the population in other parts of the state of Texas. The other statistic that I think is relevant, very relevant to you in Houston, is you take I-35, which we call Main Street, Texas, and you start at the Red River and you go south to the Rio Grande and you go east of the counties along I-35 and east of I-35, and you'll find that 87% of Texans live in that area. So with all of that having been said, I want to come back to the rural areas of Texas. And one of the key decisions that our commission members have to make, and as I said, I'm proud of all of them, but we have to work together and we have to balance the needs of rural Texas with the needs of urban and metropolitan Texas. And so to do so, we've worked very hard on trying to balance all these different competing needs across the state. Even with the new funding streams that we have, as you might guess, our job is to always have more projects in search of funding than have funding in search of projects. And that's my job as chairman. And my whole motto as chairman has been execute, execute, execute. And that's to make sure that we've got the projects teed up and ready to go so that as that funding becomes available and we can build those projects around the state of Texas where they're needed and when they're needed. Now, let's come back to rural Texas for a minute. And I just want to share these statistics because this is new information that we have compiled. I've worked with my staff here at the headquarters. And when Governor Abbott became governor in February of actually late January of 2015, and then I was appointed in February of 2015, that year the UTP had 6.1% of the UTP was allocated for rural funding. Every year since 2015, there's been a steady stair step up on a percentage of our UTP, which is the big, construction program. And so I use that as a key, and that includes maintenance, that includes, the whole ball of wax. And it started out at 6.1%, but what I want to share with you today, that it has gone up every year that I've been on the commission, and every year Governor Abbott has served as governor for the state of Texas. And today, in our 2021 UTP that we passed last August, the 2021 is our most recent, most current, it's grown from 6.1% in 2015 to 16.7% of the overall UTP. And that's important. And I want you to know that the rural areas of Texas have also received what I believe to be a fair allocation of funding. It's the area of Texas where there's been more funding than population. But as the old song goes, there's miles and miles of Texas. Mm-hmm. We have to take care of all of our areas of Texas. The reason why that's important for you all to know is that I want you to know that even though Houston is the biggest recipient by far of our funding at the TxDOT and the commission allocation, it's important to know that there is a balance and that we work with that balance. And for you to be able to share with your colleagues around the state that the commission may allocate a lot of money to Houston because you're Houston centric, understandably, mm-hmm. But you also need to be armed with the facts. And that is that we also are taking care of these rural areas of Texas as well. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to kind of highlight and make that point clear. The other thing I'd like to make clear that I think is important is that in addition to these $26+ billion of Texas Clear Lanes projects, many of which are in your backyard, we have also, as I said, as chairman of TxDOT, my whole policy is execute, execute, execute. We now have over $24 billion of projects under construction in real time throughout the entire state of Texas. And that is an absolute historic record. Very important for y'all to know that. We've also increased our contracting payments, not only for the construction industry, but the engineering industry, by over 26% year over year. So these new funding streams, I want you to know, and again, armed with the facts, that we're taking these new funding streams and we're putting these funding streams to work. Where as soon as it's coming in, it's going right back out because there are more needs in the state of Texas than we have funding. And we all know that. And you play an important role at TAG to do exactly that. Speaking of funding, let me, I mentioned Commissioner Laura Ryan. And Commissioner Ryan, I have kind of dubbed our safety commissioner because she has taken on safety four square. And one of the things that we did to support Commissioner Ryan in her safety initiatives that she's brought to the attention of our commission is in the 2020 UTP that we passed, we did a very special $600 million surge, if you will, of just put $600 million and try to start incorporating safety features with every project that we're either upgrading through maintenance or a project that we're building. And so Commissioner Laura Ryan has done a fabulous job. She's one of your fellow Houstonians, and I want you to know how proud I am of the work that she has done. And to augment that 600 million, at the last commission meeting last month, I asked her to work with Commissioner Alvin New, who also focuses, as I mentioned earlier, on the rural areas of Texas, and work together. And we have about $3.8 billion in our UTP for safety measures, and work in how can we basically take that $3.8 billion that we have in our UTP and move it into more mainstream safety so that we can continue to build safety features into all of our projects. But the other part of safety that we can't forget is safety, in my opinion, is a shared responsibility. It has part to do with, we're holding up our end of the bargain, and that is we're starting to put safety, not starting, we're continuing and we're augmenting our focus on safety on the way we're building projects and trying to be intuitive, if you will, about the design of our projects to add safety components to our construction. But when I say shared responsibility, we all know that we have way too many deaths on our Texas highways, been way too many years since we've gone without a single day without a death on our Texas highways. And it's a grim reminder that it is a shared responsibility. And we're all on highways often. I live in San Antonio and I commute to Austin on a regular basis. Happy to do it, serve the people of the state of Texas, but I see terrible driving habits every time I drive from San Antonio to Austin and back. And too much of it is distracted driving. We all are basically, we're spending too much time with our iPhones, and people feel like you can't put them down when you're driving. So sometimes I'll see a car zigging and zagging and just kind of weaving, and it's broad daylight, middle of the day, and I figured, they haven't been stopping off at the bar, surely. And so I'll go by and invariably I'll see them holding up one hand on the wheel, on the steering wheel, and one hand looking at their iPhone, and they're kind of weaving and they're just completely oblivious to it. So distracted driving, I think, is becoming one of the worst offenders of breaching this shared responsibility that we all have. And then, of course, it's simple. Wear your seatbelts. I mentioned, drinking. No drinking and driving. We've just got to get that out of our culture. And so all these things together, distracted driving, DWIs, or just driving after you've had a few too many, and not wearing your seatbelt. These are just crazy things that all of us can prevent deaths if we'll just stick to it. And our cars are becoming much more safety oriented. And, we have so many new improvements. So there's really no reason why we can't bring that death level down. And so we call it, we're basically going with our in the streak. And our idea is we want to go to 0 deaths by 2050. And with everyone's help, we believe we can get there. So, so Andrea, I'm just going to finish kind of where I started. And I can't do what I do without the wonderful 12,000, over 12,000 men and women that are our employees at TxDOT. And we can't do what we do so well without organizations like TAG. And so those are just a couple of things that I thought might be of interest to y'all. I wanted to touch on, but I'd really like to give the time to you, Andrea, and to your members and ask me any questions you'd like to ask, please.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for all that you have to know on a regular basis. And you're able to share all of that data. And it's a lot of information that you have to know at any given time. So we appreciate all of your service to our state. We did talk about, we're in session right now. Can you share if there's any bills that you see as kind of supportive of some of the work that TxDOT's trying to do right now that are currently in session and kind of have been filed?
Sure. A couple areas where we've been incorporating tech. One of the most flashy areas, I guess you might say, is all this research that's going on with autonomous vehicles. And so we have been involved with connected vehicles and working. We have a group here at TxDOT that are working on keeping up with the technology with autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles. There can be great things for this autonomous vehicle on the horizon. One is as our citizens of Texas get a little older and maybe not able to navigate so well. In my own personal experience, my dad was 95 years old and he was still driving, but he had a very severe wreck at age of 95. And fortunately, it was not his fault, but there comes a time where you're putting not only yourself, but others at risk. And so I think I'm a baby boomer. So I'll speak for myself and my generation. For the baby boomers, I think it's going to be good that as autonomous vehicles and technology comes along, it's going to be coming at the right time. The other thing that I would mention is that freight is one of the chief components of all of the the congestion, if you will, on our interstates. And of course, we have Laredo is one of the largest, if not the largest, port in the entire United States. Depends on if you measure by inland or by water, but we have a tremendous amount of freight that very importantly comes in from Laredo, from Mexico, heading north. Again, I-35, Main Street, Texas. We use that, take it all the way up. We have these charts that we see where we can see where a 18-wheeler coming in from Laredo and where those 18-wheelers end up going. If we can have connected freight vehicles and reduce some of the compression on our highways, I think that'd be a great thing. And that's all technology. And then the third is Austin was kind of a beta test site. I looked out the window because I'm here in my office right across from the Capitol. But Austin and downtown Austin was kind of a beta test site for how can we bring technology and help increase the flow of traffic more in an urban setting. And so that's been extremely helpful. So Andrea, those are just kind of a handful of some of the many things that will be coming.
Great. Well, and speaking of bills, I mentioned in the beginning that this afternoon in Chairman Canales' committee in the House, House Bill 2219, dealing with the Texas Mobility Fund, had a hearing. Can you, if it were to pass this session, House Bill 2219, can you give the audience kind of an idea of the steps that TxDOT would take to issue the bonds and then deploy the funding? to provide more mobility for all of Texas. So kind of, can you share what that would mean for TxDOT should that pass?
Sure. And again, TxDOT does not advocate. You can advocate.
Yeah.
Uh, the way I sum it up is, as chairman, I can educate, but I can't advocate. And
Right.
so I'll just say that right up front. So we have looked preliminarily at what the effect would be. And the numbers we're kind of looking at right now is that it would basically open up about $3 billion that could be used for issuance of bonds that could also further enhance building projects. So that's kind of how we're looking at the opportunity. And I'm aware, I had a very good meeting with Chairman Nichols, chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, last week.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also been in contact today with Chairman Canales. I talked with the chairman of the Senate Transportation and the chairman of the House Transportation on a regular basis. And I know that they both are advancing that cause, and that would be the kind of the short version of the net impact on transportation funding should that pass.
Well, TAG has been very supportive of it, and asking. So we will advocate. We will advocate. So we
Okay.
appreciate.
You advocate and I'll educate. How's
Right,
that?
right, exactly.
Okay.
And then I mentioned the one tomorrow, which is really just, it's kind of one of those things where, oh, we didn't include counties in the ability to create transportation reinvestment zones, right? It was just kind of more of a local, not would say local option, but it provides funding locally to create those reinvestment zones. And just kind of really what I say is it's like icing on the cake, right? It can bolster the funds that we're already getting from the federal and the state level. So so we will advocate for that one as well as, and there's others that are coming in the pipeline. But for now, we know the Texas Mobility Fund, the one today, that's pretty huge. And so we're really looking forward to staying close to that conversation. I do have some questions from folks that are
Sure.
tuning in. Jeff Collins, I know, has a question. He's on our board, former co-chair. Jeff?
Find my volume. Chairman, thank you for being with us today. My question is concerning, there's discussions now about a federal infrastructure bill, and I know it's very early in those stages. And I know TxDOT always makes a great point of being ready when federal money is available, so we get at least our share and hopefully more of our share. Have y'all started any discussions on that item yet?
Well, Jeff, thanks for the question. First of all, let me pick up with the last part of your comment, and that is Texas getting its fair share. I want you to know that actually, since I was first appointed by Governor Abbott in 2015, he sent me on what I call an expeditionary force trip to Washington. And that was, as you probably know, Texas is the last donor state. We get basically 95 cents out of every dollar that Texans spend in federal gas tax. And all I was trying to do was basically get parity and get that dollar back. So I went to Washington in 2015. I kind of brought this up. I told some of the TxDOT staff that went with me, if we come back alive, then maybe, maybe we've got something we can work on. If I get shot, then probably wasn't a good idea. We'll go on to the next thing. So we've been working on trying to get parity. My last trip to Washington last year or I should say in 2019, before COVID hit us all, was successful in that I met with the entire Texas delegation, and they've all signed on now. And I said, you're basically the largest voting bloc in Congress, certainly on the House side, and I believe second only to California right now. And so we're trying to, and Eddie Bernice Johnson out of Dallas was the one that really helped me. And Eddie Bernice Johnson basically got everybody together with me and said, we've got to all sign on the same letter. And so both our U.S. senators, as well as all of our congressional delegation, including your wonderful congressional delegation in the Houston area, all signed on. And so that's how we're gonna get more of our federal gas tax back. And I'm not giving up on that. Like we talked about earlier, Governor Abbott, was kind enough and believed in me enough to reappoint me for another 6 years. I'm not giving up on trying to get back our fair share. That's point number one. Point number two is, we just received from CARES Act money. Now part of this got allocated to the MPOs directly, but right at $1 billion for transportation funding, and that came out of the CARES Act. The infrastructure bill that you're referring to, Jeff, I suppose is the $3 trillion infrastructure bill that we read about in the Wall Street Journal this morning. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about that. It seems that I was glad to see that they mentioned the word roads in the Wall Street Journal article. I think we'll just, we have a team led by Wes Hambrick in Washington, D.C. that works with us on that. I'm sure that Wes and his team is following this extremely closely. I'm following it just because of my interest as chairman at TxDOT, and I assure you we will do what we can to continue to follow this as it evolves and do what we can for the people of the state of Texas in terms of getting our fair share of the funding, Jeff. Hope that's responsive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. I know we have a comment. Mayor Joe Zimmerman is on from Sugar Land. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, first of all, thank you for your leadership on the commission. Congratulations on your reappointment. I also wanted to recognize we've got a great district engineer in Eliza Paul here. Commissioner Ryan has been absolutely super with helping. I serve on the Transportation Policy Council at HGAC. We've got many of the members that are on this. We appreciate your continued support for the I-45 project. It's very important to the region, and we want you to know that the region appreciates your support.
Thank you, Mayor Zimmerman. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So we know that a certain James Bass is departing at the end of session. He did say he's committed to staying till the end of session, so you hold him to that, right? We're gonna make sure he stays throughout the whole session. So I think there's been some questions about what you're looking for in the next executive director, and just if you can kind of reflect on your time having worked alongside James.
Sure. Well, James has been an absolutely fabulous executive director. We met just a little bit before our meeting with you today, going over some things. I'm going to miss James. He and I have worked extremely well together. I'm actually the only commissioner on the commission that has gone through an executive director search. And so our other three commissioners have not gone through an executive director search because we've been fortunate enough to have the long tenure that James Bass has brought. But James is a very young man, but he is at a point where he can retire from TxDOT, and he and I have talked very frankly with each other. He kind of shared with me that he wanted to stay in Austin, and this opportunity came along as executive director of CTRMA. Mm-hmm. You're right, Andrea. I said, please don't leave me during the legislative session. Right. And so we were able to work together with the leadership of CTRMA, and they were agreeable to, and they understood how important it was for James to finish out this legislative session. So my deal was that James just stay through May 31st,
Okay.
I won't come back and beg for more. It's a deal's a deal.
Mhm.
Texas, so we're gonna, shake hands on this, but he agreed to stay through the end of May, and we will certainly appreciate his time with us. You know, if you ask what are we looking for, my answer would be I'd like to find another James Bass. So I'm looking for James's clone out there. Um, I think the hallmarks of a great executive director is, first of all, integrity in everything we do. That is absolutely a foundation. So the integrity that this person brings, because the integrity with which the Texas Department of Transportation operates under, that is absolutely a foundation. Um, you got to have high energy. The governor and I kid with each other. He thinks I've got a lot of energy. I tell him I think he has a lot of energy. So, but this job energizes me, and I think this job would need to call someone to be energized to be able to be in this position. To really, desire is such an important human motive, and if you don't have the desire to be an excellent executive director, then you shouldn't be an executive director and be given this great opportunity. So desire and energy, integrity, and then you have to have the requisite skill sets. Now, James is not an engineer by background, so we're not tethered to the idea that you must be an engineer to be the executive director of the Texas Department of Transportation. So I think it's helpful, but what James brings is a very strong financial background, and we have so many talented engineers at TxDOT, and what James has done a great job of traversing, if you will, is the financial world, which is important to get. I mean, you can have a great set of plans, but if you don't have the funding and you can't figure out how to get the funding delivered, you can't build the project, right? So one of the things that I've appreciated about James is bringing that financial acumen, and I'm a banker by background, so we kind of talk the same lingo, and I can think through funding issues with James. So whether the next engineer, whether he or she is an engineer or not, I think he or she needs to have the financial background to be able to do that. The other thing is leadership. Leadership is really it's an intangible quality, and I think you've either got it or you don't. And the next executive director, as James does, needs to have leadership qualities, and that's going to be very important. And another thing that I'm a big believer in is communication. And I say very often that I think listening is a lost art. And I think listening is a very important quality that people have. And I think too often we talk past each other or don't listen to each other. We're trying to think about the next thing we're going to say or whatever. And I think communication is very important to be able to articulate our goals and objectives. And then speaking of goals and objectives, to be able to really work with the commission on what are the shared goals and objectives, and then be willing to work, because the executive director reports to the commission, and be able to work with the commission and make sure that our goals and objectives are in sync with each other, so that we can work with each other and not be working at cross purposes with each other. So that's just kind of a quick, overview.
No, I think that's great. It was funny because when you were mentioning about it doesn't necessarily have to be an engineer. There were a few engineers that were messaging a question saying, can it be an engineer again? But I think your point about being able to kind of traverse both of those worlds, the financial and the engineering, is really critical for being at the helm of TxDOT.
Right.
So thank you for such a thoughtful wish list.
Oh, sure.
And we look forward to whomever is chosen, and working with them moving forward. I wanted to re-congratulate you again on your reappointment. And 6 years is, I know you said the last 6 years went quickly. It does seem like a long time, though, looking forward, considering the last year that we've had. So I would say, what do you most hope to accomplish over the next 6 years in your reappointment?
Well, I appreciate the question. And I've given that a fair amount of thought. And one of the things, my dad always told me that you always finish what you start.
Mhm.
And I grew up with those words. And as chairman, I want to finish what I've started. Now, I plan on starting a lot more. So at some point, I'm going to have to rotate off. But this Texas Clear Lanes is something that I'm really proud of. And we have so many projects that are under construction. And I think they'll truly be transformative to transportation solutions throughout the state of Texas. So again, I'm channeling what my dad always told me: you finish what you start. And so I'm really moving ahead on Texas Clear Lanes. But now as chairman, I started Texas Clear Lanes when I was a commissioner. Now as chairman, I have to look at all facets of our transportation kind of mosaic. And so I'm very focused on making sure that we are giving the rural communities of Texas that funding that they need and the support that they need. I'll continue to do that as chairman. We're going to continue to build big projects. I-35 Capital Express in Austin, that's one thing the governor and I have worked together on. He believes, and I share that belief, that it is absolutely a statewide strategic priority project. Those of you that have the pleasure, I'll put it that way, the pleasure of driving north and south on I-35 through Austin have experienced what we've all experienced that have driven it. I mean, you're coming directly, west from Houston and then back east. But what I think you all are familiar enough with Austin I-35 that it's been actually 48 years since any improvements have been made to I-35 through Austin. And the last time improvements were made to I-35 were the new upper decks. And I was a freshman at SMU coming to a UT football game in Austin, and it was amazing. Back then, I felt like I was George Jetson or something, on those upper decks. But Austin has exploded in growth. Not only is the growth in Austin exploded, just as it is in Houston and the other 3 areas of Texas Clear Lane, San Antonio, Fort Worth, and Dallas, but also it's the freight corridor, going back to what we talked about earlier. And I-35 through Austin has just been an absolute parking lot for too long. It's the number one most congested choke point. And we alternate between Houston and Austin. Seems like every other year you get the award one year for I-45, and we get the award in Austin for I-35. So, that's what I want to accomplish. Is I like to get things done, and I'm not afraid to tackle the big projects. And over the next 6 years, I want to be leading this wonderful organization and thinking about what really needs to be tackled that has not been tackled. And I-35 Capital Express had not been tackled for, as I said, it's been 48 years now.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. Kind of in follow-up to that, I know we've got a question from Barry Goodman about kind of some thoughts on the congestion in projects. Barry?
Hi, Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you. Thanks for everything you do. I've wondered over at least the last 15, 20 years about the merits of and particularly now with the innovation and technology coming as we know it is, what are the merits of constructing truck bypass lanes around urban areas that would decongest, in a sense, a little bit the I-35s that we're talking about? There is a certain percentage of trucks that are destined for those urban areas, but there's a large percentage that are not. What would that do to reduce accidents on our highways, free up some capacity for additional vehicles? And there's uncertainty, as you know, post-pandemic with people moving into the virtual world, working from home and all of that, what that impact will have. But I'm curious as to the merits of considering that as maybe part of your clear lane initiative that would assist trucks in that they would have much better access. It would reduce accidents and it would maybe even be something that you could toll. It might be something that the truckers and the unions and everything else that support them would agree that this would be a great thing for the trucking industry here in Texas, save time, help get freight there. So just curious as to your thoughts on that.
Well, Barry, it's a good question. And again, using Austin as kind of an example, as you know, we have I-30, which is basically it runs along the eastern corridor of I-35. So it runs not exactly parallel, but almost. It takes kind of the big loop around Austin. And you know, you can jump on in let's say Buda and jump off in Georgetown, and you can avoid going through I-35, the I-35 parking lot, as I call it, in right through Austin. And we find that a lot of the traffic on I-30 is in fact 18-wheelers, and the very reason that you suggest. We really haven't had the luxury of building multiple lanes just for trucks because, you know, right now we're even with all the new funding streams, we're basically looking, you know, we're a state that has more projects that need to be built than funding. And so we're trying to take care of all of the above. I think you know that 93% of Texans get behind the wheel of a car or a truck, and that's their means of transportation. And certainly for the foreseeable future, even, you know, with the autonomous vehicles that Andrea asked me about earlier, and people are talking about the new rage is EVs or electric vehicles. And I pointed out to a reporter the other day that even EVs need a highway or a surface to drive on. It's just the means of the motor that really kind of changes. The propulsion mechanism changes, but the fact that they have 4 tires and they're hitting the surface do not change. So Barry, we're looking at all kinds of alternatives, but the harsh reality is that we don't really have the luxury of being able to just say, you get these lanes if you're a truck. Now, you know, on most lanes on the interstate, we do restrict truck traffic, say on the left lane, so that, you know, passenger vehicles can basically pass. But I think you're on to something. It's just that we just haven't had the luxury of the funding to build dedicated truck lanes only.
Yeah, it would be interesting to analyze the savings that might occur if additional capacity was freed up. That would at least delay investments to build more lanes in the future and the other benefits. It just occurred to me that a lot has to do with federal policy, what's going to happen there, new interstate policy, but it's just something that I've thought about for a long time, and I appreciate your answers. Thank you very much.
Oh, Barry, I'm making a note as we speak, and I'm gonna talk with my staff about it. It's a very good thought.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Well, I think we have time for one more question. And I think we talked about looking forward, Chairman. And so now I think it's a good opportunity to look back and share anything that surprised you besides COVID, because that surprised all of us. So we can't, that's too neat. That's too easy of a surprise. That has surprised you in your first 6 years in being a part of the commission and learning more about TxDOT.
It's hard to say that as surprised because it's been an evolution. Andrea, I'm not trying to say that I mean, nothing just jumps out at me that is, out of the birthday cake surprise type thing. It's been more of an evolution, being new to the Transportation Commission without really any pre-existing thoughts about how it was going to work. I came to it with a lot of enthusiasm and zeal and energy. I still have that enthusiasm and zeal and energy about what I learn every day. It's been a wonderful experience the first 6 years. Governor Abbott in February of 2015 told me I'd learn a lot about the state of Texas. I like all of us, we think we're pretty good Texans and we have a pretty good handle on it. I've learned a lot. It's been wonderful. The people at TxDOT, I didn't know what to expect. Again, my day job is to work in the private sector.
Right.
I spend about 70% of my time, if not more, as chairman at TxDOT. It's practical. I call it a volunteer position, but I really feel like I'm called to public service, and I'm proud to be able to spend this time and be able to serve the people of the state of Texas. And I say that with all the sincerity in my heart. I really enjoy what I do, and I really I'm honored that I have the opportunity to serve the people of the state of Texas. And I'm honored that Governor Abbott places that trust and confidence in me to do it. So it's been an evolution of experiences. And I can't really think of something that there was a real aha moment, but it's been wonderful to get to know the people at TxDOT, the dedication that they have. It's been wonderful to get to know people like you and others around the state that all have a shared interest in a better Texas tomorrow and building a better Texas today. And it's been a great experience. I just have to say it's been wonderful, and I look forward to the future.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and we look forward to working with you to advocate alongside your educate. And we really appreciate your time today. We encourage everybody to tune in tomorrow for the special commission meeting that you mentioned, talking about clear lanes, and also the commission meeting on Thursday, the regularly scheduled one. And I know Commissioner Laura Ryan is going to be making some remarks in honor of, this is actually our advocacy week, our Greenlight Houston Advocacy Week on a virtual platform. So thank you for being part of this week with us. Again, we look forward to continued conversations and really seeing some good legislation come through this session for transportation. I think it's well earned, and we certainly need more investments in transportation. So thank you so much, Chairman. And with that, we're going to close our program for today. And we look forward to, we have our 5 county judges conversation on Friday. So it's a busy week for us. And so we look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Andrea, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to be back with you and your members. I hope it's not another 4 years before I get a chance to talk to y'all again.
And it'll be in person.
Hope,
right?
Absolutely. And remember, that was good Italian food you had in January.
Yes. Oh, that's right. But yes, right. Maggiano's. Yes. You're good memory.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you.